in the last financial year, what was California Burrito's overall revenue?
We did 110 crores last year.
How old were you when you came up with the idea of starting California Burrito?
So I would have been about 21. Then it was a bit of a challenge because people were not totally convinced that 22-year-olds who were not from India, none of us were Indian, knew what they were doing in opening a restaurant.
I went through your Instagram profile and I saw that you go with 3 of your restaurant managers every year
Yes.
for an overseas trip.
Yes,
right?
we love that.
That's a great cultural exercise. Did you learn a few cuss words?
Yeah, a few. I avoid those ones.
Yeah, okay. So can you just cuss in front of the camera for the next 30 seconds?
दोस्तों आई एम कमिंग टू दिल्ली इन अक्टूबर टू फिक्स ऑल ऑफ योर फाइनेंसेस। तो अगर आप दिल्ली, गुड़गांव, नोएडा, फरीदाबाद या फिर दिल्ली के आसपास कहीं भी रहते हो, डिस्क्रिप्शन में एक फॉर्म है, फॉर्म को जल्दी भरो। चलिए अब वीडियो के मजे लो। गुड बाय।
हेलो एंड वेलकम टू अ न्यू एपिसोड। जनरली हमने बहुत सारे इंडियंस देखे जो अमेरिका जाते हैं फॉर बेटर करियर अपॉर्चुनिटीज, पर आज हम एक ऐसे अमेरिकन से मिलेंगे who came to India for better opportunities. He has built a fast food chain and does more than 100 crores in revenue every year. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
How's it going?
Very good.
How come India? When did you come to India? And please introduce yourself.
So I'm Bert. I started a company called California Burrito here in India. And, I first came to India in 2010. And the reason I came to India was that it was very different than the US. And a few of my friends had been here before, and I loved Indian food.
How were you introduced to Indian food?
My mom cooks Indian food.
Oh, wow.
So I think, she had probably been making dal and papad since I was 3, 4, I don't know. I always liked spicy food. So decided to come study here, and I felt tremendous energy in India. You could feel things were kind of growing. And I felt as soon as I went back to the US after I'd finished my studying here, that I really wanted to come and start a business here. And I was very passionate about food. I'd worked in a Mexican restaurant in the US.
Okay.
And I think at that point in time, the US, the economy wasn't great. And there's this kind of fantastic story about India's economy. And I felt that this was the place to be over the next few decades. So thinking of that, I took the decision after I graduated to move here, and came with 2 of my co-founders, my friends, and we started California Burrito.
First things first, what did you study in India? Did you study something related to food?
No, in college I was a music and public policy major, and the program that I was on was kind of really just an exposure to India. So there was Hindi classes, there was history, there was religion, there was art, architecture. We worked with an NGO. I lived in a village in Rajasthan for 6 weeks. So it's kind of an immersion in India. I lived with a family, a Marwari family in Jaipur.
So did you learn any Hindi?
I learned a little Hindi,
Did you learn a few cuss words?
Yeah, a few. I avoid those ones.
Yeah, okay. So can you just cuss in front of the camera for the next 30 seconds? Cool. So you studied music and you did a cultural course
Yes.
in India.
Yeah.
Right? Your only introduction to India-related food was from your mother.
Yes.
How come Mexican food? How did you come up with the idea of starting a restaurant? Why Mexican food and why India?
When I was studying here, I noticed that, number one, whenever I went to a wedding, they would be playing not Mexican music, Latin music.
Yeah.
So a lot of Shakira, a lot of Latin beats, which I found interesting. But really what happened was there was someone on the program who was Mexican, and she cooked food for some of the families. And I noticed how much people liked the food that she made. And it just made me think, is there a place for Mexican food in India? You don't get Mexican food in India. And I personally love the model of Chipotle in the US.
Okay.
So I felt that this might be, an interesting business opportunity, and no one else seemed to be doing it. So bring the food I love, a format that I love, to a country that I really loved my time here and felt that there was, a great trajectory for.
What was the Chipotle model? Can you explain it to our viewers?
Sure. I think, the Chipotle model is really from San Francisco, the Mission District in San Francisco, where there was a lot of immigrants from Mexico. They set up taquerias. But burritos became a popular format of food, which is not really Mexican per se. You don't find a lot of burritos in Mexico. But they do the assembly line where you'd pack kind of a whole meal inside the wrap and take that with you. So I think the people working on the railroads used to do this. And then in the Mission District in San Francisco, this format became popular. You can go there today and
in India, this was Subway. That was Subway for us.
I think similar format. You pick out what goes into it.
So how old were you when you came up with the idea of starting California Burrito?
So I would have been about, I think, 20 or 21.
How did you arrange your funds? And why did you need the funds for? What are some of the immediate costs?
So I think how this happened was I came back from India. I decided that I wanted to do this business. I took a few business school classes to learn about business because previously I was in music and government things, so no business. And then I got the job with Moe's. I think from that, then we wrote a business plan. And in the business plan, we listed out, what are all the equipments we're going to need to open this restaurant. And so we estimated that probably we would need about $100,000 to open a restaurant, which was much higher than we really needed for the first store.
Yeah. Can you break it down? Like, of course, you said some equipments. A second must be the rent
Sure, yeah.
situation. Third, furniture or furniture.
Sure.
What are some other costs?
Well, you'd have a deposit for your rent.
Yes.
Certainly your interior costs would be, a big component. You wind up having to buy things like software. You'll need working capital. You have to buy, your food, and you'll have to hire people before you start. So again, working capital for that.
Yeah. Can you break it down, like in general, if somebody's planning to start a restaurant and if they have to invest 100 rupees, how much goes in equipments, how much goes in working capital, how much goes in employees?
If we were taking 100 rupees, okay, let's say 20 rupees goes to equipment, maybe 25 goes to interiors, maybe 10 goes to deposit. Depends on the real estate. And then other miscellaneous, I don't know, maybe another 10. You'll keep some for working capital. Depends again how much you want there.
Makes sense. So how did you arrange that $100,000 in capital?
The first thing we did is we put in our own money. So each of us had saved a good amount of money. We'd each had jobs, while we were in college. So we each put in about $15,000. And so that got us to $45,000.
Okay.
Then we went to our parents, and two of us, our parents invested, I think probably maybe $20,000 each. And then, then it was a bit of a challenge because people were not totally convinced that 22-year-olds who were not from India, none of us were Indian, knew what they were doing in opening a restaurant. We had met, multiple prospective investors through our network, our friends, our family. And gradually, people started feeling that maybe we were going to do something decent. So,
where did you set up your first store? Which city?
So our first store is in Bangalore.
Oh.
And we had to kind of analyze between Gurgaon and Bangalore. And we visited both. We checked out both and then felt Bangalore was the right place to start.
Okay.
And then it took quite a bit of time to find the right real estate. So not only were investors apprehensive when we first got started, landowners were also apprehensive about these, young guys from
Will
America.
they be able to pay rent?
Are they fly-by-the-night operators? Who are these guys? What's going to happen? So people were a little skeptical about that. But ultimately, after a few deals fell through, we did finalize a property in Bangalore, in Bangalore, and opened in October 2012.
Perfect. What you said that there were a few challenges, right? While finding places. So what were some challenges that you faced in the initial days? And what were some things where you guys got it easy because you were from a developed country?
Mm-hmm. So I think there was a lot of skepticism on the part of landlords about us opening a restaurant. We didn't know anyone when we moved here. We didn't know anybody in Bangalore. And I think we also didn't really understand business very well. We didn't understand maybe business in India very well also. It's hard to figure out who to trust at first. So I think that, figuring out who were trustworthy people to work with was challenging at the beginning. And over time, we found great people to work with.
Perfect. And that is something which might be standard for all foreign nationals.
I think that's standard for any place where where there's an information asymmetry where someone in the ground knows much more than you know about what's happening.
Yeah. And generally, any business with a lot of information asymmetry, if that is the only benefit, that sooner or later, the other competitors will catch up.
Yeah.
By hook or by crook, any reason. Okay. You said that the way India did business is very different, right?
Well, I think that, we hadn't done business before.
Okay.
And then you're also in a new culture. And it is different. Things are different in India than in the US in many regards.
Of course. Would you be able to answer how different is doing businesses in America from India?
I think that, things are much more flexible here.
Okay.
Things are much more people-oriented here.
Jugaad. Have you heard of this word?
Of course I've heard of that word. I think people find ways to make things happen in creative ways, which I think is good. People are creative in getting things done here. You have to be flexible. You have to use your brain to, things don't just follow a system. They have to be, you have to use your brain.
Yeah, the reason why this is so unique about India as a nation is because we have never seen life with a lot of abundance. That has happened in the last 1 or 2 decades for people of my age, right?
Yeah.
Before that, everyday survival was the only key goal of living. So India in the last 20 years, of course, it has developed like crazy, but all of us, like at least one generation before us, has seen very difficult times.
Yes,
That's
no
why,
doubt.
we can do things faster or in a more efficient.
And I think there's tremendous things that people can learn from doing business here. I think that maybe they wouldn't understand if they did business in the US. So I think, people are very good at business here.
Yeah. Currently, how big is the fast food market in India?
I had to look this up. So right now it's about a $17 billion market. It looked to me like probably the organized aspect of that might be 30 or 35%.
Okay, rest is like local stores.
Yeah.
So I run a finance show, and a lot of people want to start a restaurant as an investment.
Yes.
So what are the first few things that one should look at before putting their money in a restaurant business? Can restaurants ever be a side gig?
Someone has to be very involved in running it. So someone needs substantial skin in the game to run it. I think that would be maybe it can be a side gig if there's someone else who's very involved. But I think fundamentally someone has to have skin in the game and be very active in running it.
Cool. First point. Yeah. Second.
So I think the second thing is real estate is incredibly important unless you're doing a cloud kitchen, which is really a different model. Real estate can make a great format do fantastically. If a great restaurant opens in a bad location, they might do terribly, even though they're a great restaurant. So I think deciding a right location is very, very important, and probably getting the right price of location.
Of course.
And then I think delivery has really become a big part of the business really since COVID. And so do you have anything you can do in delivery? What's your USP in delivery? If you have a delivery piece of the business, then the location matters, but less.
So that was about to be my next question. Currently, delivery, like food delivery, has become very big.
Yeah.
Almost everybody in tier 1 cities has a food app. So if somebody's just planning to, invest in the food business,
Sure.
should they focus on delivery or dining? What is the situation?
I think it would depend on the cuisine that you're doing.
Okay.
I don't think there's any generic advice on that regard.
Okay, let's say a pizza.
Pizza is a very competitive category. There's plenty of people doing delivery very well with pizza.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
I think one thing I could say is that if you're opening a delivery store, look at Google Maps and make sure that there's good density where you're going to be delivering to. I think sometimes you'll find a real estate and it's right next to, say, a lake. In Hyderabad, they have the big, the lake in the middle of the city. If you open next to that lake, half of your radius is a lake.
Of course.
Make sure that you pick a place that has good density around it.
What should one look at while starting a delivery focused business, and what should one focus on if they are planning to start a dining first business?
I think if we're doing a delivery focused business, we need to figure out how we're going to differentiate ourselves from the other options online. Also, one thing we figured out on delivery kitchens is they should be nice kitchens. I think a lot of people do a cloud kitchen, but then get a kind of a very cheap piece of real estate.
How does it matter?
Attrition. So I think without having a customer in the restaurant, it's not as fun for the employees to work in the restaurant. I think that's a mistake. I think you want to make sure that you have a great environment for your people to work in, because there isn't that customer connect like there is with customers coming for a dine-in restaurant. If you're running delivery, there has to be probably some discounting. A lot of customers won't buy you for the first time if there's not any discount. You're going to have to probably buy visibility on Zomato and Swiggy. So if you don't have a signboard on a restaurant, physical asset where people can see and touch and feel.
How do they discover you?
How do they discover you? So whatever you were going to pay for rent, in a way, then comes back into marketing on delivery. So I think a lot of people think, delivery kitchens are going to be very profitable. They aren't as profitable. I think fundamentally because marketing costs are higher and the commissions are high. For a standalone restaurant, visibility is crucial. People get good photographs. I think maybe the ambience is very important. This day and age, people are doing very beautiful stores. I went to New York and I was disappointed at the quality of the interiors compared to things I see now in India.
What is the cost of getting a franchisee of California Burrito?
So we do not franchise. I think we've had many people interested to franchise. We felt that, our system is rather complex compared to, say, a Baskin Robbins. there's a lot of cooking that happens at the store. And we've felt that a franchisee becomes a bit hard to manage if they're operating the store. We're Coco. We have a company-owned, company-operated.
Okay.
I think the other thing is that let's say you're doing a franchisee-owned, company-operated, then you really are winding up with many investors because you have, every store is a new investor. So then you're managing many different relationships. So we felt that, if we need capital, maybe it's better to have a few investors, but not every store is from an investor.
True. How can you fix it? Because if you start a franchisee model, this 55 outlets can become 550 very soon.
Sure.
Right? It is just like turning on a liver.
Yes.
So how can you actually make sure that the quality is in control and your branding is not impacted?
If I'd solved that, I would have done that.
Perfect. I love honest people. He's 100% honest. But if those problems were solved, would you be open?
Sure. I think that, franchising works beautifully in the U.S. I think there's many very enterprising Indians in the U.S. who own tons of franchises. I think almost famous for owning franchises. So I think, there's these entrepreneurs that get unlocked with a great franchisee program. We haven't figured out how to do that. And I think we feel that, the company-owned, company-operated model maybe suits the complexity of our format better.
Have you ever tried the franchisee model?
So early on, we did do 2 franchises where it was a franchisee-owned, company-operated. They did well. The lessons learned from that were that we didn't really want to do it going forward. Just didn't feel like the right approach.
Fair. Earlier, you mentioned the challenges of running a franchisee model as a company owner.
Yes.
But as an investor, would you suggest people to, invest in a franchisee?
If it's a financial investment, sure. I think if someone wants to do that, no problem, provided they like the brand and the brand's doing well. So they should do their due diligence before they do that. I think if they're going to be operating it, if they're passionate about running the restaurant, then great. If they're not, then I would think there are better investments for them.
Okay. So if somebody wants to invest in a franchise, if somebody has decided that they want to take a franchisee,
Yeah.
what are a few things? What is the hygiene check that one needs to do before putting their money?
Well, I would visit multiple of the stores of the brand, figure out how good the sale is whatever has been pitched, what's happening on the ground. I think that you probably will want a tight radius clause,
Can you elaborate that point?
Sure. I think that, what I saw has happened with Subway is that where it started where there was kind of a good radius given to each store, gradually over time they just started putting them all right next to each other.
Yeah.
So the company is maybe, they want their money, so they're happy to hand out lots of franchises. But what about you?
True.
So I think that you should have a good radius if you're going to be opening a franchise of a store. The third thing I would say on investing in a franchise is I think a lot of people like a franchise that doesn't cost a lot of money to set up.
Yeah.
But often a franchise that doesn't cost a lot of money to set up won't make you much money. I don't think that just because it looks like a cheap one to do makes it a good one to do. You should think about how much sale it's going to be generating. Some of these small formats do well, but you have to think of not just how much CapEx goes in. You think, 10 years from now is this, or maybe 3 years from now or 4 years from now, are people still going to find this brand relevant? So I think that is something to keep in mind. Is it kind of a future-proofed concept or not?
So now we are moving to the finances part of the video, right? So firstly, how many stores do you have as of 2023?
We have 55 stores right now.
Across how many cities?
4 cities.
Can we do the cost breakdown of any store?
I can give some general pointers. I think, in the restaurant business, your labor plus food should not exceed 50% of your sales.
Okay.
So, we have gross margins of about 63%, which is actually pretty low.
It's low.
Yeah, I think a lot of brands would be maybe 70%.
Okay, so what does gross margin in the food industry mean?
Gross margin would be your sale less your direct inputs, so food and packaging.
Yes. No labor cost.
For the calculation of gross margins, no, because it's not a direct input.
Okay.
The labor is kind of a semi-variable cost. It's not fully variable.
Cool.
So, generally we have invested less in marketing, and we tried to provide, I would say, a compelling value that you would buy at the restaurant. So the food quality is good, the quantity is good, and our margins are slightly worse. Different brands spend different amounts on marketing. Pre-COVID, we were spending about 1% on marketing, and now we spend about 4% on marketing.
That's still pretty low.
Pretty low, but maybe, another brand might spend 8% on marketing. So it just depends maybe on the life stage or what's your strategy.
One more thing that You said that you increased your marketing budget during COVID,
Yes.
which is like 8-9 years after your operation.
Yes.
For anybody who is planning to start restaurant business, a food business, right? Would you recommend spending a lot on marketing? What should be their marketing and ad strategy?
I think that it was a mistake that we didn't start marketing earlier. And I think we didn't either work very hard on organic marketing, nor did we work very hard on paid marketing.
So in the last financial year, what was California Burrito's overall revenue?
We did 110 crores last year.
110 crores. Okay, spread across 55 stores.
No, we would have had less stores last year. Maybe we could say that's spread across an average for the year of 45 stores.
There is a general belief for people outside the restaurant industry that a restaurant will not break even in the first 3 years of operations.
So they probably mean that they won't return all their money. I think that, on average, I've read that a restaurant returns generally on average the capital in 4 years. Although some of these, I think in McDonald's might be 5. They put in a lot of capital into these stores and they invest in high quality things. So there's different models here, but I think the average is about 4 years.
Got it. When you started off, how many employees did you have and how many do you have right now?
So I think our first store, we hired about 20 people to open, which was quite a few. In fact, some of those people who joined us before we opened our first store are still with us.
Oh, nice. I went through your Instagram profile and I saw that you go with 3 of your restaurant managers every year for an overseas trip.
Yes,
right?
we love that.
That's a great cultural exercise.
Yes, we have a lot of fun with that. Right now we have about 906 employees.
And because it's a COCO model, you are paying
Correct
for everything. If you do revenue of 100 rupees,
yes,
how much do you do via dine-in and how much do you do via delivery?
Pre-COVID, we did most of our sale in dine-in. Delivery made up less than 35% of our sale. COVID changed everything. Immediately overnight, dine-in almost went to 0%, delivery went to 100%. I think we're right now on a journey where we get back to about a 50-50.
As a business owner, what would you prefer?
I think 50-50 is a good place to be. It's balancing both. I think that, dine-in is a more profitable business. At the same time, a lot of acquisition and knowledge happens in delivery about the brand.
Okay. So how long does it take for you to prepare a rice bowl?
So our prep times are about 11 minutes, which means that if we get the order, it takes 11 minutes for them to send the order.
Yes.
And there's many orders that are faster than that. Our format is the assembly line. So it's kind of, they're making it very quickly. I think they're making orders back here right now.
I can vouch for that because whenever I order a rice bowl or a salad bowl in my office, it comes within 20 minutes.
Yes.
So we are towards the end of the video, Bert.
Yeah.
Right? I learned a lot. I'm sure that a lot of people who wanted to know how to invest in restaurants, how to invest in the food business, got a lot of information from you. So thank you so much on my entire community's behalf. And any last thoughts?
I think it's been a tremendous journey for us, for me. India is everyone's talking about India these days. And I think India has welcomed us in our business in a beautiful way that, hopefully we're going to be here a very, very long time. So it's been a tremendous journey and I'm very bullish on our business. I'm very bullish on India. It's been 11 years so far and I think it's going to be quite a bit longer.
So I'm sure that you are not homesick.
I'm not. I think, India has become my home in a way. I was joking with someone in my team. I've 11 years in India, so I'm 1/3 Indian so far.
Of course, that's the beauty of India. Sab aao, come one, come all. That's the end of this video. Thank you so much. Please hit the like button. If you found anything valuable in this video, consider subscribing. Do follow Bert on LinkedIn, Twitter. Are you on Twitter?
I'm not. Instagram, I'm on.
Instagram, LinkedIn. Okay. Thank you so much. See you guys in the next one.